Hello, parents. My name is Mrs. Wynn, and I am a first grade teacher here at Wilson's Mills. Um, I just wanted to introduce you to our first grade Google site where you can learn about all the things that your child is doing in their classroom. Within this Google site, we will cover standards from math, reading, science, and social studies, along with some digital links for you and your child to enjoy. But for the parents, if you are looking at your child's report card and you are wondering, what do these things mean? What is expected of my child? And how can I find out more information? This is one of the places that you will be able to go. Always, you are encouraged to communicate with your child's teacher. Um, but one of the resources that we have is this Google site that breaks down exactly what our children, our students, are expected to be able to do by the end of first grade. Today, we're going to take a look at math and science. So I'm going to go through some standards, and these are all standards that every first grader is working towards. So we're going to start with 1.OA.1. These are our word problems. In first grade, we are expected to be able to solve addition and subtraction word problems within 20. Now, there are different ways that we are expected to solve these problems, and there are different kinds of problems. We're going to be looking at problems with adding to and taking from with a change unknown, putting together and taking apart, the add-ins are unknown, and comparing differences with unknowns. Now, what is an unknown? An unknown is simply the answer or the number that we don't know yet. Add-ins are the two smaller parts that we add together to find the answer or the sum. Now, I will say in math, we are working very hard with our math vocabulary. So if you hear your child talking about adding two add-ins together, that just means they're adding two smaller numbers together to equal the bigger number. So in first grade, we are working to solve these one-step story problems within 20 with unknowns. And in first grade, we are using a triangle to represent the number that we do not know yet. And we're going to scroll right down this way, down to 1.OA.3, where we're learning about properties. We are expected to apply commutative and associative properties as strategies for solving addition problems. What does that mean? In first grade, we will be learning how to add three numbers, three different add-ins. Now, our job, if we're looking at the expectations right here, we are going to learn that it does not matter what order those add-ins are in. For example, if you're adding 1 plus 2 plus 3, we are going to be able to determine that it does not matter whether it's 1 plus 2 or 3 plus 2 plus 1, or 1 plus 3 plus 2. Whatever order they're in, it does not matter. We will still get the same answer. We're also going to look at how to group numbers. So when we're grouping numbers, we might not say 1 plus 2 plus 3. We're going to have to add two of those numbers together. So we might say 1 plus 2 equals, and then that number plus 3 equals to get our answer. Or we might group them a different way. So one of the things that we're working on is showing how to do that. In first grade, knowing the answer is fantastic, but we really want to know how we get there. What path do we take? What strategies do we take to get to that answer? That will show that we truly understand the concept of what we are learning. Up next, we have 1.OA.7, and that's understanding the equal sign. Every number sentence has an equal sign, and it's our job in first grade to learn that whatever is on one side of the equal sign has to be the same as the other side. We work a lot with true and false in first grade, and we see this in many different variations. You can see some examples under the P that we're working towards. You might have an expression like 5 plus 8 on one side and a value on the other side. So what students are expected to do is take that 5 plus 8 and solve it. We need to show that 5 plus 8 does indeed equal 13. When we can do that, we can say that it is true. Now, sometimes we might see 5 plus 8 equals 12. Again, it is our job, what we're working towards, is to show why it's true or why it's not true. If a student can take manipulatives, counters, or cubes and show 5 plus 8, and then they can build a 13 for the other value, they can physically look at those cubes and say, well, this side has the same number of cubes as this side. But if the equation was 5 plus 8 equals 12, they would be able to look at the two representations and say, this side is missing one, this side has one extra, so that is not true. We may also see some areas where the equal sign is moved. We call this the math ninja in our classroom. Sometimes the math ninja will move that equal sign, but it's the same skill. Whatever is on one side has to equal what is on the other side. Sometimes we might just see two basic values, like 9 equals 9. We're going to learn that that is the same. It is true. If it's 9 on one side and 9 on the other, it is true. And then, of course, we have the expressions on both sides. This is one where we are learning that you have to solve each side of the equal sign. So my example on the screen is 2 plus 3 equals 4 plus 1. We have to solve 2 plus 3, and we have to solve 4 plus 1 to see if it is true or false. And the distinction is that students will be able to say, this is true because, this is false because. So it's explaining. It's not just knowing an answer, it's explaining how we get that answer and using that math vocabulary like true, false, sum, add-ins, balance, and same value as. Then we're going to come down to measurement. Measurement is just what it says. We are measuring. Now, in first grade, we measure with non-standard units. That means we're not using rulers. We're not using inches and centimeters. We are using non-standard items, which are cubes, counters, paper clips, anything that you can put end to end. The goal in first grade is to be able to take an object, measure it with these non-standard cubes, counters, beans, and then count them to see how long something is. And when we report about it, when we explain it, we're going to say the paper is 10 cubes long. It's about telling what units we are using and how many it is. And then, of course, measuring appropriately, making sure everything is back to back. No gaps in between, no zigzags, nothing of that nature. Up next, we have 1.md.4. This is our data standard. We are working to organize, represent, and interpret data with up to 3 categories. Now, we can do this in a lot of ways. A lot of times when we're working with data, we'll do class graphs. We'll take votes. In the past, we've done our favorite animals, our favorite colors. Every kid takes a sticky note and writes their favorite. Then we come up to the board and we organize them. When we're talking about data, we're learning how to organize and represent. So we may put the votes, if we're talking about animals, we may put the votes as ocean animals, land animals. Sometimes we just separate it by the animal. There are many different options for doing this. The next thing we do when we look at the data, we're not just organizing and representing, we are interpreting. This is where we ask those tough questions. How many people voted for this animal? How many people voted for that animal? How many people voted all together? And then we get into the comparing. How many more people voted for cats than dogs? How many less people voted for fish than cats? and communicating that information out. Then we move to place value, 1.MBT2. In place value, we are understanding that the two digits of a two-digit number represents tens and ones. This is where we start getting ready for second grade skills, because in second grade, they really dig into place value, tens and ones, and hundreds. In first grade, however, we learn how to model numbers using math tools. These are our cubes and our counters. We're also going to introduce our towers and our cubes, our 10 towers and our 1 cubes, to start representing those numbers. For example, if I'm building the number 12, I would use 2 10 towers, which are like sticks, and then I would come back and take 2 ones, 2 single cubes to the side, and that would build my 12. That's what we're learning how to do in this standard. We're also working in counting by tens and understanding that tens are made up of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 tens and 0 ones. There's always going to be a 0 in that place for the ones. And students are working to be able to show these numbers with our tools, with our manipulatives. Then we have MBT4, which are 2 digits. This is where we're going beyond 20, beyond 30. In first grade, we do count all the way up to 150, but when we're talking about adding within 2 digits and building 2-digit numbers, we are going to stay within 100. And we're going to learn that a 2-digit number and a 1-digit number, or a 2-digit number and a multiple of 10. When we're looking at the hundreds chart, we have 2-digit numbers all over the hundreds chart. Some of them are multiples of 10, and then some of them are 2-digit numbers that have a 10 but also have a 1-digit number. They have a number in that ones place. And we're going to be using our concrete models, our manipulatives, our counters, our tens and ones, and even the hundreds chart to help us do that. Up next, we have subtraction, MBT6. We do a lot of focusing on subtraction in this standard. And the cool thing about subtraction is that we can relate it to addition. At the time of the year where we get to this standard, we have learned how to make concrete models and drawings using our manipulatives, using number lines, strategies from place value from prior standards, properties of operations, commutative and associative, and now we're building that relationship between addition and subtraction. And just like we did with addition, we're going to be working in multiple tens, subtraction within multiples of tens, and using the modeling to make that happen, using the tens and ones. Then we have geometry, 1G2. In geometry, we are working with 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional shapes. We are learning the characteristics of those shapes, the components of those shapes, the sides, the vertices or corners. We're going to learn if they're flat or if they have substance to them. And with the 3D shapes, we're going to be learning, do they roll? Do they slide? And we're going to be taking both 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional shapes to create new shapes. And finally, we have 1G3, which is fractions. Within fractions, we call those parts of the fractions shares. So you won't hear us say, can you cut that circle into 2 parts? Can you cut that circle into 2 halves? We are going to say, can you cut that circle into 2 shares? So we're going to describe those shares as halves or fourths. We only cover halves and fourths in first grade. And then we're going to be describing the whole of 2 as 2 of or 4 of the shares. So the parts are called the shares, and we're going to talk about them in terms of 2 of the shares or 4 of the shares, halves or fourths. And then understanding that when we keep cutting something into equal shares, the more we cut it, the smaller the parts get. And we use parts and shares interchangeably. Towards the end of the unit of this standard, we do start calling them shares more confidently. And that is it for the math standards. Now, if you come up to the top, we can take a look at science standards. In our science standards, one of the first ones we do are soils. That's 1E2. We're going to understand the physical properties of earth materials that make them useful in different ways. So we're going to be looking at rocks, minerals, soils, water. We're going to be getting out the soils kit that comes with our grade level. And we're going to be investigating each of the kinds of soils, the humus, the sand, the clay. And we're going to plant some things. We're going to watch roots grow. We're going to find out what these things need, what plants need in these different kinds of soils to make growth successful. We also look at ecosystems. Now, in ecosystems, we're going to be looking at various environments, and this is L1 and L2. We're looking at various environments and behaviors of humans that enable those plants and animals to survive. This is where we're getting more into what do plants need. Plants need food and space and shelter. This is looking at how the different plants and animals get what they need from the environment. And we're going to be looking at the North Carolina environments, and we're going to be dabbling in different kinds of environments around the world. We're also going to be looking at how humans affect the environment. What are we doing to take care of our plants and animals? What can we do better? We get into reusing, and recycling and littering. We're also talking about earth materials. When we're talking about earth materials, this is more of a general overview of rocks, minerals, soils, and water. So in 1E2, we're getting the overview. This is soils that we're looking at. This is soils that we're investigating. The base layer of Earth's materials. And then when we go into that soils unit, that's where we hit the soils standards. So this one generally comes first, and then we dig into the meat and potatoes of what is happening in our earth. We also discover the earth, moon, and sun in first grade. And within the earth, moon, and sun, we're recognizing the features and patterns of these respective things as observed from Earth. So what we're trying to do is identify at the basic level, we're identifying day and night, what happens during the day, what happens at night, what animals are out in the day, what animals are out in the night. We're describing the differences between the Earth, moon, and sun. What do they look like? What do they do for us? And then knowing that the sun is a star. One of the cool things about this standard is that we really investigate the moon, and we talk about the phases of the moon, the patterns of the moon. A great thing to do with the moon phases is our Oreo moon phases, where the students take Oreos and create the moon phases and put them in order around a plate. It really brings science to life. And finally, we have forces and motion. With forces and motion, this is 1P1, and we are just understanding pushes and pulls of objects. We're beginning to explain how an object begins to move. We talk about what causes the force, what causes a big force. We're just describing the three ways that an object can move or be moved, going faster or slower or changing direction, and then giving different examples of types of forces: push, pull, and magnetic forces. We do a little bit of experimenting with magnets and how different magnets of different sizes affect things, affect the movement of things, about why magnets attract objects, and changes in forces and motion. And that is a little bit about our science standards. Now, within this Google site, you have access to all of this information. So if you're looking at your child's report card and you're just unsure of what really they're expected to be able to do, this is a great resource for you to have. Also, our teachers are more than willing to sit down with you and talk about anything that you see on this site. In a later video, we will talk about literacy and social studies and some of those standards and what's expected of our students. But to get us started, we hope this was a great example to help you guys, you families and parents and family and friends, understand a little bit about what we are asking your students to do, about what we are expecting your students to work towards to reach their goals for the year. Remember that every student is on a level playing field, but we also must realize that we all learn at different rates in different ways. So sometimes it's just a simple conversation with your child's teacher, to say, hey, I noticed that, little Susie is a B in this standard in science. What can we do, or what does she need to do, to be able to be progressing towards proficiency, to meeting her first grade level goals? And then we would pull this up and say, well, these are some of the things that we've been learning in class, and these are some of the things that we've been trying to do. And you can work with your child's teacher to really help your child at home. We hope this was very helpful for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your child's teacher. Thanks.